recall the chair and sort of the idea behind that contingent being of a chair and how it leads towards presumably the existence of the necessary being. And so chair derives its existence from molecules. Molecules derive their existence from atoms. Atoms derive their existence from electrons, protons, and neutrons. And these derive their existence from quarks. And these derive their existence, although not electrons. Electrons don't derive their existence from quarks, but these here, quarks and electrons, derive their existence from quantum fields. And then who knows what happens afterwards, but perhaps the story continues. And so these derive their existence from something else, and these then from something else, and so on. But the point is that every member in the series here continues to derive their existence from something else, So unless we hit the source of existence, then nothing should really exist. And so the quantum fields, it seems like there would have to be something else, and then something else and something else, until eventually we hit the source, right? The origin of existence that has this O that stands for the origin. It has existence itself. This is the idea behind the argument, that you end up with the source, and from the source, existence goes backwards all the way to the chair, and so we have a chair. And this origin is what is referred to as the necessary being, something that exists necessarily, and from it the existence comes. All the other members of this series here are contingent beings. They derive their existence from something else. All right. So whether we agree or we disagree with this idea here, let's move forward. So let's say that let's just grant this. Let's say that the origin of existence that has existence itself exists, right? And then let's see how this how some philosophers can take this and bring it all the way there to the existence of a god, because there's still a lot of work that is left here to be done, even if you grant that there is such a thing as this origin from which the existence of other things comes. So in the first place, let's remember that this origin itself cannot be made out of parts, because if it is made out of parts, then it derives its existence from its parts. And if it derives its existence from its parts, then it has existence in a derivative way. And so it cannot be the origin. So if there is this, if we do have this origin, then it cannot have any parts. But if it cannot have any parts, then there can be only one. And suppose that we had origin 1 and we had origin 2, they would have to have something similar, namely they'd have to have existence. Each one of them would have to have existence and then from that existence goes to other things. But they would also have to have some kind of a differentiating feature. So perhaps this one would have some blue differentiating feature here, and then the other thing would have some kind of a red or purple differentiating feature, and so they are distinguished in some way. But what that establishes is that they're made out of parts, right? The existence itself, so each one of them would have existence. I'm going to put here existence and existence, and then this existence somehow goes to something else and something else and something else and something else, and eventually we have maybe a table, and then here this existence goes to something else, 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 and then maybe we have a car. All right, so they both have some similarity in that they both have existence, but they also, if there were to be two of them, they would have to have some kind of a differentiating, distinguishing feature, and I just put blue and purple. But if they have a distinguishable feature there, then some differentiating feature, then they have parts, right? Existence and that feature. And if they're made out of parts, then they have existence in a derivative way from its parts. That which is composite, which is made out of parts, has existence from its parts. And so these things couldn't really be the origin. So we'd have to go farther, and there would have to be some other origin, and maybe that then would have some some intermediate other origin, and then it would have to be some other intermediate origin and some other intermediate origin. But we'd still have to hit some origin, the actual origin that has just the existence itself, right? And that true origin from which the existence does actually come cannot be made out of parts, the argument goes. Because again, if it's made out of parts, then it has its existence in a derivative way from its parts. So it cannot be the actual true origin cannot be made out of parts. And if it is not made out of parts, then there can be only one. You cannot have more than one. So the argument goes, I'm going to box this thing. We're going to go ahead and say yay for this. So only one is what we're going to grant and has no parts. And all things derive their existence from it. How do you establish from here that therefore there is a God? Because this is nowhere near yet establishing such things as this thing being good or intelligent so that it can know things, or all powerful and so on and so forth. So let's see how that goes. It's kind of interesting actually. So the first thing that we'll try to we'll attempt to establish, I suppose, with this argument is that this thing is immutable, which implies that the origin is changeless or unchangeable. And the argument will try to do it like this. There are no parts in this. I'm going to grant that there are no parts in this. If there are no parts in this, then this thing is non-composite, and this term is used here, non-composite being. So the origin is a non-composite being. Now, in order for something to be changeable, then it has to have parts, presumably, because then what you can do is, so let's say that the thing has parts, then let me like draw parts here. So we have parts. There are some parts in this thing. If it has parts, then these parts, then this being here that has parts can either lose or gain some parts. And if it loses or gains parts, then it goes change, or these parts can be rearranged, so that you move these parts around from one place to another, and then this thing can change. But if the thing has no parts, so that it just sort of is one thing, there are no parts in it at all, then there's nothing to be rearranged, and so in that sense it cannot change. There's nothing to be gained into it, nothing to be lost from it. It's just one thing, and if there's just one thing there, then it cannot undergo a change by being rearranged in any way. It just continues to be, is the claim. And so non-composite being, if it were to be changeable, then it would have to have parts, so which it can lose or gain, or which should be added here, or which could be rearranged. But the necessary being is non-composite, meaning it is simple, absolutely simple. It has no parts, and so it cannot change. Therefore, it is immutable. So the claim goes. So the next few steps, what we have here is, let's go 1, 2, 3, and 4. The end result seems to be that this thing is eternal. So we've established that, well, the argument attempts to establish here that this thing is immutable, and let's go on. If the necessary being had a beginning or end, it would not be necessary. Therefore, necessary being is beginningless and endless. All right, and that which is beginningless, endless, and immutable is eternal. So necessary being is eternal. It doesn't change, it's immutable. All right, now next one tries to establish that this thing is not material. And so step 1, step 2, here we pull from Aristotle. So all material things are composed of parts. Specific physical stuff, you may recall that this is what Aristotle calls matter. I'm going to put here matter. So it's not the same thing as the chemical matter that we think of today. It's for Aristotle, matter is just the physical thing that makes up the object, and an essence. All right, so you have matter and essence or form. Aristotle calls this thing form. But the necessary being, or the origin, is not made out of parts, and so it cannot be material, therefore it is immaterial. And so you'd have that this origin is not material. All right, so far what we have is that maybe the argument has established that this origin is changeless or immutable, it is eternal, it is not material, maybe. But here's a line of argumentation that you could take if you wanted to move in this direction. Now let's take a pause from these from these arguments, and then go back to, well, let's establish something that's going to be useful for continuation of the argument itself. And so pause for a moment and a bit of a tangent, which will bring us back to the argument. So there are potentialities and actualities in things. I'm gonna write this out. There are potentialities and actualities in things or in beings. And so, for example, let's take me, and let's write some actualities that pertain to me, and then we'll list some potentialities afterwards. So actualities is I'm sitting right now. So I'm sitting right now. I'm a man. That's an actuality. And you know, I could measure my body temperature and see what that is. I'm not going to do that, but there's some temperature. So I have a specific temperature. You know, and so on. I could, you know, I have two hands. I have two hands, I have two eyes, and I have a nose, and so on. So you could list these actualities. I think you get the idea, right? I'm a philosophy teacher, I'm a physics teacher, and so on. So you can list these actualities here, and there are many of these. So things have actualities. I think it's kind of obvious here what this means. Now, potentialities. So potentialities are, well, I'm sitting right now, but there's a potential that I could stand up, right? I could be standing. So there's a potential of potentialities. Potential. So there's a potentiality of me standing, potential of standing, right? There's no potential of self-combustion, for example. I'm not going to just self-combust here. That's not going to happen. So potentialities are not things that are conceivable. Potentialities have to be somehow possible for the thing to be in it. And so there's a potential of me standing, right? There's no potential of me walking through a wall. I'm not going to walk through a wall. There's a potential of me standing. There's a potential of me becoming a well, I don't know, maybe a chemistry teacher, right? There's a potential of becoming a chemistry teacher. There's a potential of me having a tea, and so on. So I think you get the picture, right? There are potentialities and actualities in things. Right. So now when it comes to this origin that we're talking about, the necessary being, or the origin, that thing cannot have potentialities or actualities because it has no parts. Or rather, it cannot have both potentialities and actualities because then it would have parts. In fact, it cannot have multiple actualities, right? So no multiple actualities because then it would have parts. So if anything, at most one actuality. There cannot be no multiple potentialities. Because then they would have parts. So at most one potentiality, but it goes a little farther because, all right, so this origin or a necessary being cannot have multiple actualities, and it cannot have multiple potentialities. But could it have one actuality and one potentiality at the same time? No, because then it would have parts, right? The actuality and potentiality. So it could either have only one actuality or only one potentiality. Now, if it had only a potentiality, then it wouldn't exist. Right, because the potential to have a potentiality for something, that potentiality is not yet actualized, so it's not quite yet there, only in some potential sense. And so it has to be, there has to be something actual about it. Right? If it is to exist at all, it has to have the actuality of existence. And so the only thing that it can have is this one actuality. There can be no potentialities in it. right? Actuality, and in fact, it has to be the actuality of existence, because it has to have existence, which it then gives to other things. So the origin or a necessary being can have only one actuality, and it is the actuality of the existence itself, and there are no potentialities in it at all. So the argument goes, and so we can now take this and write that the necessary being is a pure actuality of existence, which is kind of obvious. I mean, if we're going to grant that there is this origin of existence which has no parts but it has existence, then we have to say that it is the existence itself. The existence itself, right? It's like the fountainhead of existence from which all of the existing things spring. The very origin itself, right? So pure actuality of existence, and I'm going to put this in a box here, pure actuality. Now let's use this and to move forward. So now let's try to see how one could attempt to establish that this origin is all powerful. And the necessary being or the origin is it's pure actuality. It's pure actuality of existence, and it actualizes existence of other things. So I'm going to put here it actualizes existence of apparently all other beings, all other things, all other beings, things. So let's see what this thing says here. To have power entails being able to actualize potentials. Well, this necessary being or origin, I put here the origin of existence. Oh, it actualizes existence of all other beings, and so it has power, but does it have all power? Well, actually, if it actualizes existence of all other beings, then it has the power to actualize all that exists, and therefore it has the power to actualize all power that exists, and that could potentially exist, presumably. Well, anyways, let's see what it says here. So any potential that is actualized is either actualized by this actualizer, right, from which existence comes, or by a series of actualizers, which terminates ultimately in this actualizer. So all power derives from the pure actuality of existence. But to be that from which all power derives is to be all powerful, and so the pure actuality of existence or purely the actual actualizer is apparently all powerful, and so the argument here attempts to establish that this thing is all powerful. So the next step that you could take is you could do this. This is pulled from Platonists, but everything is either a material entity. So let's see if we can eliminate some of these things. Well, the origin, this thing here, the origin or the necessary being, the origin of existence or the necessary being, would not be a material entity because we have apparently established that already, that this thing is immaterial somewhere before. This should be entity, or there should be an E, misspelled entity, abstract entity. So, well, let's come back to it in a little bit, but let's consider first maybe the mental content. So could the origin be some mental content, like some thoughts, some ideas? Well, no, because the origin is not caused by anything to be, right? It causes other things to be, but it itself is not caused by anything to be. But the mental content is always caused by the mind to be, and so the origin couldn't be any mental content. Abstract entity. So this is put here to satisfy Platonists. See, Platonists think many things, but one of them would be that there are these abstract entities, such as roundness, that exist on their own, somewhere out there in the Platonic world. Squareness, triangularity, numbers, and so on. Now, consider one of them, and then we'll generalize this stuff. So, like the roundness or circularity. These abstract entities are causally inert. They don't cause anything at all. They're somehow there in some alternate reality, but they don't really cause anything here within this world. And because they don't cause anything here within this world, well, if they don't cause anything within this world, then they couldn't possibly be the origin. Right. Now, I think a lot of philosophers would say that there are no such thing as abstract entities of roundness that exists on its own somewhere out there, or circularity that exists on its own somewhere out there, or number 7 that exists on its own somewhere in some other reality. But, you know, I guess you do put it here just to exhaust all possibilities. And so, in any event, since this thing does, even, let's say these things do exist, right? There's some triangularity out there that exists on its own. It doesn't cause anything here within this world. So it's causally inert, and so it couldn't be the origin itself. So this is not that. Now, if it is true that everything can be grouped into these 4 things, then, and if it is also true that the origin or necessary being does actually exist, then it must be a mind. Now, some would say here that, well, everything is either, you know, material entity, abstract entity, mental content, or mind, or something else, right? Or something else. Well, then maybe you could say, well, I don't know, maybe it's not a mind, maybe it's something else. But if you think that the reality is exhausted by these 4 categories, it's either matter, some abstract thing out there, some mental content, or mind, then in that case, this thing is mind. And it's not too difficult from here to show that if it is the mind, then it would be a mind that knows all things. Right? Let me see if I can find that. I think I know how to do the next one. It'll be interesting. So I think what you can do is you can combine these two, that the origin apparently would be all powerful. So we get it from here. And it is an all-powerful mind. An all-powerful mind, right, which is something we get from here. Well, if the origin or the necessary being is an all-powerful mind, then it has the power to know all things. And if it has the power to know all things, then it knows all things, because it doesn't have any potential. It doesn't just have a potential to know all things, because there are no potentialities in it. And so apparently it would be all-knowing. All-knowing, it's an all-knowing, all-powerful mind. So it's intelligent. And so we could now, if we claim that everything works in the argument, then what we could do is we could now make the following statement. So there exists a cause which is simple or non-composite, that it is unique, that is, there's just one, it's changeless or immutable, it is eternal, no beginning, no end, and it's changeless, it's immaterial, it is an intellect or mind, so it's intelligent, and omniscient, meaning it knows all things, so that was here. It's uncaused, ultimate cause of everything other than itself, so the fact that it is the origin, so it's all of that. It is purely actual. We did not establish that it is perfect. We did not put that there, so I'm going to take this out. Omnipotent, meaning it is all powerful, that's there. We did not establish that it is fully good, so we didn't do it, but you have these parts in your worksheet where at the end of the worksheet you have a way to see how you can also establish that. Now, if it does work, then that's as close to the definition of the God of classical theism as it gets, and so you could make that claim. Then the argument that we have looked at here was the argument from contingency, contingent, and necessary being. All right, so we have argued from here towards the existence of God, and I think it's worthwhile seeing one of those arguments. The other types would be the argument for the existence of actual, well, unmoved mover, which is similar. It's not, which is similar to the concept of necessary being. I think if properly understood, you would somewhat get there, and then from here you can, you would then have to still argue that this amounts to a god. Uncaused cause, which is similar to the unmoved mover. I think on some interpretations is actually the same thing. And then from here you'd argue that there's God, and then oh, okay, so maybe I'm familiar with 3. I know there were, well, anyway, so there are other ones. That's all I can claim. The one that I showed you is specifically from a contingent necessary being, and that whatever you see on the handout and the worksheet that I gave you is pulled from it is pulled from Stanford. All right, so this will do.